Hi everyone, welcome to Session 4, International Frameworks, Opportunities and Barriers of the Hybrid Nature-Based Solution for Disaster and Climate Resilience Training course. Nature-based solutions, or NBS, are increasingly recognized for their potential in addressing various environmental challenges, but are these the best way to manage climate and disaster risk? We will take a closer look at the opportunities and barriers when it comes to NBS in this session. In this session, we will first review the various international frameworks that recognize NBS as a part of critical strategies for addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, and disaster risk reduction. We will then look at the barriers to implementing and scaling up NBS. We will end this session with the principles of nature-based solutions developed by IUCN and the Commission on Ecosystem Management. Let's get started. The concept of nature-based solutions, or NBS, has evolved over time, building upon various traditional practices and scientific understandings of nature conservation and management. The term itself and the formalized concept are relatively recent developments in environmental policy and practice, becoming more prominent in international discourse over the last few decades. Starting from the Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, a comprehensive international agreement focused on conserving biological diversity, using biological resources sustainably, and sharing the benefits derived from genetic resources fairly and equitably adopted in 1992. Followed by the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation in 2002, NBS is not explicitly used in the text, but the principles and actions promoted by these earlier protocols and frameworks inherently support NBS. These solutions involve managing and conserving ecosystems, restoring degraded areas, and using natural resources, all of which contribute to biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. Over the years, NBS are increasingly recognized as effective ways to address a range of environmental challenges, including those outlined in the IG biodiversity targets and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The CBD's strategies and action plans, developed and updated by its parties, often incorporate NBS implicitly through their focus on ecosystem services, ecosystem restoration, and the integration of biodiversity into broader land use planning, water management, and climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. NBS are thus an integral part of the efforts to achieve the CBD's objectives and are increasingly highlighted in the national strategies and action plans of the parties to the convention. In 1994, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification specifically recognized the important services provided by ecosystems, especially in dryland ecosystems, for drought mitigation and the prevention of desertification. As the impacts of climate change became more apparent, the role of ecosystems in mitigating and adapting to these impacts was recognized. NBS started being seen as vital in efforts such as flood mitigation, storm protection, and carbon sequestration. With the adoption of the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015, NBS was further endorsed and adopted. The emergence of NBS as a formal concept is a reflection of the increasing recognition of the inseparable links between human well-being, climate change, and the health of our natural environment. It represents a convergence of traditional ecological knowledge and the modern scientific understanding, aligning conservation objectives with broader societal goals. NBS offer a way to harness natural processes for sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, and climate adaptation and mitigation, while also contributing to biodiversity conservation and the well-being of people. And according to the Nature-Based Solution Initiative, a total of 122 NDCs were submitted in 2021, representing 148 signatories to the Paris Agreement. Analysis show that these new NDCs reveal enhanced ambition for nature-based solutions to climate change, with 84% of revised NDCs, including the protection or restoration of ecosystems or agroforestry in their mitigation or adaptation plans, up from 78% in the first round. 96 countries include MBS in their adaptation plans, 45 countries in both adaptation and mitigation components, 3 countries in just their mitigation plans, and 3 elsewhere in the NDC. This is an increase from 78% of the first round NDCs. Moreover, 41% of all revised NDCs from a total of 50 countries explicitly use the term nature-based solutions, and an additional 2 mention nature-based actions or interventions. No country in the first round of NDCs used the term. The use of the term is particularly welcomed as MBAs are clearly defined with the global standard and clear guidelines on their integrity. The world's poorest nations include MBS the most in the adaptation components of their NDCs. Specifically, MBS are referred to in all of the 17 nations classified as low income by the World Bank, and all but 4 of the 40 nations classified as lower middle income. As was the case with the first round of NDCs, MBS appear more regularly than engineered interventions, both in general and across all income groups. Engineered actions are included in 69% of 110 NDCs that address adaptation. Engineered actions are explicitly included in the adaptation aspect of 76 NDCs, of which all but 2, Montenegro and Oman, refer to nature-based solutions and/or hybrid measures. 93% of nations that address adaptation refer to hybrid actions, combining MBS and engineered approaches. The most popular of these are resilient water infrastructure and management with 67% and climate smart agriculture or CSA with 63%. Hybrid approaches were particularly prevalent in lower income nations. All of the NDCs that address adaptation from low-income nations included at least one type of hybrid action. 97% of those from lower middle-income countries did the same. When it comes to disaster risk reduction, MBS are increasingly recognized as an effective means to address various aspects of disaster risk reduction and are closely aligned with the objectives of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030. The Sendai Framework is a global agreement aimed at substantially reducing disaster risk and losses in lives, livelihood, and health, as well as in the economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental assets of persons, businesses, communities, and countries. Under the 4 priority areas of Sendai Framework, NBS are specifically mentioned in all of them. Under Priority 1 of Understanding Risk, it was stated that ecosystems need to be incorporated into risk assessments. Under Priority 2 of Strengthening Disaster Risk Governance, Sendai Framework is calling for the integration of NBS into DRR and development strategies. Under Priority 3 of Investing in Disaster Risk Reduction, we need to have sustainable use and management of ecosystems to integrate disaster risk reduction into environment and natural resources management approaches. And for Priority 4 of Enhanced Preparedness and Build Back Better, Sendai Framework is calling for the integration of ecosystem restoration in post-disaster needs assessment and the use of green infrastructure for disaster control infrastructure. And in other recent international frameworks, ecosystem approaches are mentioned more specifically. For example, in the New Urban Agenda, a document endorsed by the United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, also known as Habitat 3, provides a 20-year roadmap for sustainable urban development and represents a shared vision for cities of the future, envisages cities and human settlements that protect, conserve, restore, and promote their ecosystem, water, natural habitats, and biodiversity, minimize their environmental impact, and change to sustainable consumption and production patterns. And under the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration for 2021 to 2030, led by Food and Agriculture Organization and United Nations Environment Program, a call for action has been issued for the protection and revival of ecosystems all around the world for the benefit of people and nature. It aims to halt the degradation of ecosystems and restore them to achieve global goals. Moreover, it emphasizes that every single ecosystem, from forests to farmlands, mountains to oceans, cities to wetlands, needs to be cared for and repaired. There are specific areas on scaling up efforts to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems worldwide and to raise awareness of the importance of successful ecosystem restoration. More integration of MBS into broader context of sustainable development and climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies is expected. As the urgency to address climate and disaster risk increases, MBS offers a path that is not only ecologically sound but also economically viable and socially inclusive. They provide a means to work with nature to build a more resilient future, harnessing the power of ecosystems to protect and sustain human communities and the natural world they depend on. In summary, ecosystem management for resilience through MBS is embedded in many global frameworks and agreements relating to sustainable development. All the Rio Conventions, including CBD, UNCCD, and UNFCCC, promote ECO-DRR and EBA in national conservation and environmental management strategies, as well as in risk management plans and programs. Ecosystem-based adaptation and ECO-DRR are recognized as instruments for promoting the synergistic implementation of the Rio Conventions, including the Aichi biodiversity targets and the UNCCD land degradation neutrality targets and the Cancun adaptation framework. The joint focus on resilience and ecosystem-based approaches provide a common entry point for the coherent implementation of these international agendas, particularly biodiversity, climate change, DRR, and sustainable development. You can see the various ecosystem services and priorities, goals, and targets of the global frameworks are closely linked in the diagram. Now let's look at the IUCN Global Standard for MBS. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, developed the global standard for MBS in 2020 to provide a common understanding, definition, and criteria for what constitutes an effective nature-based solution. Launched in July 2020, the standard aims to ensure that any intervention labeled as an MBS meets certain criteria to maximize its potential to address societal challenges effectively and sustainably. The IUCN Global Standard for MBS is based on 8 criteria and associated indicators that provide a framework to design, verify, and scale up MBS. These criteria are intended to guide users in the consistent application and scaling up of solutions that harness the power of nature and to safeguard the integrity and biodiversity of ecosystems. The 8 criteria are as follows. C1. The starting point is a societal challenge. C2. Even if site-specific, we need to consider the larger scale systems and risk. For example, part of an ecosystem such as mangrove patch could be well out of the target site but may have upstream and downstream impact on the MBS, and local communities may depend on a livelihood market in the city. This is to ensure that we take factors at play at scale into account to enable longer-term durability and sustainability of the solution. C3, C4, and C5, representing the three pillars of sustainable definition. It is indeed unrealistic to think that we will always have a win-win-win or triple bottom line outcome straight up, therefore C6, trade-offs. Each time, decisions need to be made about what is used today and kept for tomorrow, who and which stakeholders gain and benefit, and who will get returns later. These decisions are context-specific each time, but we can ensure transparency and inclusive decision-making to derive these decisions. If not, there is a high risk of promoting even farther inequity and marginalization. C7. We are implementing solutions under changing conditions. Ecosystems are dynamic and complex in themselves, changes with climate change. The theory of change is based on assumption at the beginning, but factors can change. For example, a cyclone can impact the MPS site. So we need to consider how to register these factors to be able to adapt to the solution and respond to the change in order to maintain their relevance and still have a return for investment at the end. C8. The aspirational criterion. It involves embedding and institutionalizing MBS through sectoral policy mainstreaming, integrating into regulatory and operational frameworks of companies, grounding in community-based governance structures for durability. We cannot achieve MBS ambition through a short-term, one-off project approach. We will have a dedicated session on the IUCN Global Standard next week when we meet in Bangkok during the in-person portion of the training course, where we will discuss in more detail about the IUCN Global Standard and how you can apply that in your work. While nature-based solutions offer a multitude of benefits for addressing environmental challenges, their implementation can face several barriers ranging from the definition of terminologies to financing for MBS and the measuring of the impact of MBS activities. We will go through the barriers to MBS from four categories: technical barriers, institutional and planning, capacity, and market and finance. Under the technical barriers, starting from the definition of MPS and the lack of data and baseline environmental data to the dynamic of working with natural systems, it is inherently difficult to implement MBS and to track its performance. It is very challenging to quantify the many co-benefits of MBS, especially positive externalities such as human health and livelihood, food and energy security, and biodiversity. And due to the public good characteristics of MBS, the non-excludability, such as when a forested park in the city improves air quality, all residents benefit from this improvement regardless of whether they contributed to the creation or maintenance of the park. Or the non-rivalry nature, such as a wetland that provides flood protection, serves this function for all nearby property owners simultaneously, makes it difficult for the private sector to be engaged. Overcoming these technical barriers often requires investing in research and development, building technical capacity, and fostering knowledge exchange among practitioners, scientists, and policymakers. Developing best practices, guidelines, and tools for the design, implementation, and monitoring of MBS can also help to address these challenges. Institutional and planning barriers can present significant challenges to the deployment of MBS. These obstacles typically arise from established organizational and governance frameworks, as well as the methodologies employed in planning and policy making. Commonly, conflicting governmental agendas, a limited grasp of MBS principles among key governmental actors, and the protracted timescales needed to realize the benefits of MBS contribute to these hurdles. Moreover, the effective implementation of MBS often demands large-scale application, which may extend across national borders and encompass various subnational jurisdictions such as provinces and municipalities. This breadth of impact introduces regulatory and legal complexities that necessitate consistent and efficient coordination across different sectors, a practice that is frequently absent in many nations. Addressing these institutional and planning impediment calls for comprehensive reforms, including policy updates, organizational realignment, enhancement of institutional capacities, and the establishment of cohesive planning frameworks that acknowledge and give precedence to MBS. When it comes to the technical capacity to identify, implement, and maintain MBS approaches, we are faced again with the lack of knowledge and awareness, coupled with technical skill shortage, inadequate training and education, limited research and data, poor access to resources and tools, insufficient institutional capacity, and difficulty in deciding the implementation scale. Addressing these capacity barriers often involves targeted training programs, developing partnerships with academia, fostering community engagement, and building institutional frameworks that support the integration of MBS into mainstream practices. Financial barriers present substantial challenges to the implementation of MBS. High upfront costs for design, land, and establishment constitute initial expenses, making MBS financially daunting, particularly for entities with limited budgets. The uncertain performance and durability of MBS contribute to risk perception, potentially resulting in higher costs and financing difficulties, as they are often seen as riskier than conventional infrastructure. The significant yet long-term and sometimes indirect returns from MBS lead to delayed returns, which may discourage investors seeking immediate profits. Undervalued benefits further complicate the financial rationale as the ecosystem services and biodiversity preservation provided by MBS are not always fully valued. The financing mechanism gap presents a challenge for financial institutions with traditional funding models not always adaptable to MBS. Incentive shortfall may hinder private investment as insufficient economic incentives become an obstacle. Lastly, project size issues, which the scale of MBS may be either too small to attract substantial investment or too large and intricate for easy management. To overcome these financial barriers, innovative financing mechanisms are needed, such as green bonds, environmental impact bonds, revolving funds, and PES schemes. Additionally, the development of clear business models, economic incentives, and the integration of ecosystem service valuation into economic planning can support the financial viability of MBS. Then, how do we scale up MBS approaches? According to the Global Commission on Adaptation, there are three crucial steps needed to make this happen. First, enhancing policymakers' awareness of the economic benefits of ecosystem is crucial. Natural structures like mangroves are not only cost-effective alternatives to artificial breakwaters, costing as little as 0.01 US dollars per square foot for restoration, but also offer additional advantages such as boosting fisheries. Globally, the protection of mangroves is estimated to have net benefits of $1 trillion by 2030. However, tailored assessments are necessary to pinpoint the most effective MBS for each region. Incorporating the extensive ecological knowledge of local and indigenous population can further optimize the effectiveness of these strategies, as seen in the Building with Nature initiative, which thrive through active community engagement. Second, embed nature-based solutions into climate adaptation planning. Integrating NPS into climate adaptation planning can yield significant benefits, particularly when applied at broad scales such as entire landscapes or urban areas. Governments, with their policymaking power and coordination capabilities, are well positioned to implement NPS at these levels. Starting with NPS in the early stages of adaptation planning is essential. Climate change poses a serious risk to water resources, disrupting patterns and causing droughts and floods. Studies indicate that by preserving and rehabilitating upstream forests, urban water utilities can enhance water regulation and potentially save near 890 million US dollars annually on water treatment across major global cities. Third, encourage investment in nature-based solutions. To overcome financial barriers in adopting nature-based solutions for climate adaptation, governments can play a crucial role by adjusting policies, subsidies, and public investment to favor these approaches. They can also create incentives for private sector financing. There's a significant amount of funding available from various governmental, private, and philanthropic sources that remains untapped due to a lack of awareness. Increasing knowledge about these funding opportunities, sharing successful financing models, and identifying unmet needs where donors and investors can contribute is key, a task that various organizations are actively pursuing. Equally important, we need to address stakeholder engagement by motivating community involvement through incentives. We should also develop a targeted communication strategy with clear objectives to advocate for MBS. Additionally, it's crucial to promote equity and justice by addressing the underlying factors of exclusion, inequality, and injustice throughout the implementation process. We must consider trade-offs, being mindful of potential losses, and striving to prevent the unfair transfer of risk and expenses. Targeting vulnerable areas by giving precedence to actions in locations and among communities most susceptible to risk is essential. Implementing valuation tools is necessary to employ methods that evaluate the social and political impacts and ramifications of MBS. By addressing these areas, we can enhance the scale and impact of MBS, ensuring they contribute significantly to addressing global environmental challenges. The three core dimensions of MBS, societal challenges, biodiversity net gain, and co-benefits for human well-being, are underpinned by the IUCN Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions. IUCN and its Commission on Ecosystem Management have outlined 8 principles that provide a framework for understanding and implementing nature-based solutions. These principles are designed to ensure that MBS effectively address societal challenges in a way that benefits both human well-being and biodiversity. The principles are as follows. Principle 1. NBS is not an alternative to or a substitute for nature conservation, which remains an important global priority in its own right. While NBS embraces nature conservation, not all conservation actions necessarily qualify as an NBS. NBS can be complementary to and benefit from nature conservation efforts across the landscape. For example, when a protected area was established established to conserve a certain species, but later contributes to an MBS interventions nearby. In some cases, MBS closely address biodiversity conservation priorities, but not invariably. Principle 2. MBS promotes the provision of a full range of ecosystem services or be complementary to other actions such as a mixture of seawalls and mangroves protecting a coastline from ocean surge. Principle 3. MBS are evidence-based approaches built on a thorough understanding of particular ecosystems. However, evidence can come from various sources including science, traditional knowledge, or a combination of the two. Because all situations are different, MBS should consider natural and cultural contexts that include traditional, local, and scientific knowledge through people living and having a stake in the ecosystem. In addition, this principle refers to the need for full participation in developing a MBS. Principle 4. MBS interventions for food and water security or disaster risk reduction frequently provide services for governments and communities distant from the site, but can entail loss of opportunities for those living in or near the services source. It is important to ensure that different categories of stakeholders are involved in the MBS, that the MBS in place provides the benefits to affected actors, from local communities to infrastructure management and private sector up to national level, and ensure that loss of local opportunity is avoided. For example, when a community maintains a forested watershed to supply water downstream, fair and transparent processes, as well as an explicit understanding of the local politics of negotiation and implementations are needed. This understanding should reflect the values of the watershed to the forest community and help determine the nature of compensation-based mechanism for the supply of ecosystem services, such as through payment for ecosystem service schemes. Principle 5. MBS need to be developed and implemented in a manner that is consistent with the temporal dynamics and complexity of ecosystems in order to support biological and cultural diversity so that the services provided by the ecosystem are sustainable and as far as possible resilient to future environmental change. Principle 6. Many MBS are implemented over large spatial scales such as watershed or large forests, which usually combine several ecosystems such as agricultural, inland waters, coastal, forest, which might in some cases be transboundary. This principle is linked to MBS 4 and MBS 8. Even when an MBS is implemented at a specific site level, which is linked to MBS 3, it is important to consider the wider landscape scale context and consequences, aiming at upscaling where appropriate. Principle 7. MBS should avoid changing or simplifying an ecosystem in favor of a particular service or resource, such as replacing natural mixed woodland with a monoculture tree plantation. Instead, a thorough understanding of trade-offs between current and future benefits is important when deciding among different MBS activities. Understanding and providing a process for fair and transparent negotiation for trade-offs are essential for ensuring successful MBS. Landscapes may contain different stakeholder groups that use resources for their livelihood, which may result in complex and conflictual relationships that need to be identified and negotiated. Hence the need for MBS 8 to support MBS 7 and the complexity of negotiating trade-off. Principle 8. For MBS interventions to have broad influence, it is important to make sure that they are not only practically undertaken in the field, but are also incorporated in policy and related actions. The implementation of this principle will support large-scale interventions, MBS 6, and it includes the potential for adaptive management as the intervention's outcome can inform and adopt natural resource management policy. These principles guide the design and implementation of MBS to ensure sustainability, cost-effectiveness, and provision of multiple benefits to both society and the environment. The Stockholm Environment Institute, or SEI, also recognizes the importance of nature-based solutions, and while they don't have a distinct set of MBS principles separate from the IUCN or other environmental bodies, they emphasize several key principles in their work that align closely with the broader understanding of MBS. In 2022, SEI published the Principles for Just and Equitable Nature-Based Solutions. These are 5 principles to incorporate MBS to ensure a just and equitable implementation. They include 1. Ensure that design, governance, and implementation processes are inclusive and transparent. 2. Tackle root causes of marginalization, inequality, and injustice at all stages. 3. Limit the creation of economic and non-economic losses and avoid the unjust redistribution of risk and cost. 4. Prioritize interventions for the most at-risk places and communities. 5. Devise and use valuation and measurement tools that assess social and political change and consequences. While these principles are not uniquely SEI's, they reflect the Institute's focus on integrating environmental, developmental, and social considerations into its work on MPS and other environmental solutions. SEI's research and policy work often emphasize the importance of these principles in creating effective, equitable, and sustainable solutions to environmental challenges. We would like to end this session with 2 examples of urban MBS projects. The first one is the Cheonggyecheon Stream Restoration Project in Seoul, South Korea. It involved removing an elevated freeway to reveal a 5.84-kilometer stretch of the historic Cheonggyecheon Stream in the heart of one of the world's most populous cities. This urban renewal initiative transformed a previously congested, overpopulated, and polluted area into an ecologically focused green walkway. The project has not only rejuvenated the immediate environment, but also brought about significant environmental, social, and economic improvements. It represents a pivot in urban planning in Korea, highlighting a growing commitment to health, sustainability, and social responsibility among both city officials and residents. Additionally, the Cheonggyecheon restoration has set a precedent for urban planning and development throughout South Korea, serving as a model for future projects. The second example is transforming and revitalizing the Rhine riverfront area in Düsseldorf, Germany, into a popular and accessible riverside walk. This urban redevelopment project aims to enhance the quality of urban life, promote sustainability, and improve the city's relationship with the river. The project emphasized the inclusion of green spaces along the riverfront, contributing to urban biodiversity and providing residents with areas for relaxation and recreation. Overall, the recovery of the Rhine riverfront in Düsseldorf is a prime example of how urban waterfront regeneration can create vibrant public spaces, improve the quality of urban environments, and foster a stronger connection between a city and its natural waterways. In summary, MBS are increasingly recognized as essential tools in global efforts to combat environmental challenges reflected in international policies and agreements. While there are significant barriers to the widespread adoption and implementation of NBS, there are also numerous opportunities and growing international support. Leveraging this support and addressing the identified challenges is crucial for the effective and scalable application of NBS. This is the last session of the online portion of the hybrid course on nature-based solutions for disaster and climate resilience. Please feel free to go back and repeat the session for any concepts or information. Whenever you're ready, please proceed to the quiz section to complete the online learning portion. We look forward to see everyone in Bangkok very soon.